What's up, everybody? Brand new podcast. This one's going to be on situational awareness. When I did the last episode, the So You've Been Ambushed episode, as soon as I posted it, I realized I didn't even talk about situational awareness. And so I figured, you know what, now's a good time. And the old social media was a little slow this week, so becomes another Con Ed piece for you guys. So let's get into it. Situational awareness. Simple working definition, being aware of and paying attention to what's going on around you. And, typical people think, well, I'm a pretty observant person. We do this how? Scan the environment and, we look for, you get a sense of danger as well as opportunity. And, really situational awareness is being able to kind of go about your normal activity while paying attention, while you're not really appearing to pay attention. And situational awareness, or awareness in general, it's a conscious decision that we have to make. So where does that come from? We got to talk about baselines and anomalies. And, the human brain is a pretty amazing organ, right? So once we make that conscious decision or that choice to pay attention, our reticular activating system kind of takes over. And the RAS is really just a big diffuse network of nerve pathways in the brainstem, and it connects the spinal cord, the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and it really just mediates the overall level of consciousness. And it also has a bunch of filters that kind of turn on and off that help us pay attention. It filters out some of the chatter, and it helps you focus. Because if it didn't have those filters, like your brain would explode. It would be so much input, and really, again, unless you're visually impaired, we take in so much of our information from the environment through our sense of sight. So when you make that conscious decision to say, all right, it's time to pay attention, I really need to be aware of what's happening in my surroundings. It's like saying to yourself, listen, brain, we need to pay attention. And to pay attention, in this case, I want to find in the crowd, or just our day-to-day, I'm looking for a woman wearing a green coat. And your brain says, okay, got it. It's gonna, as you look around the environment, you're looking for that. And the RAS is filtering out the garbage. It's really being attentive. And then when you find her, the RAS pretty much says to you, woman, check. Green coat, check. What's next? So what's a baseline? A baseline is pretty simple. It's the norm. It's the status quo for the immediate environment that you're in, okay? That you're in, you find yourself in. So if, you're a cop, firefighter, paramedic, EMT, whatever, you have a call area, you have a coverage area. And you're, that coverage area, might be made up of a large area, a small area, whatever. But the people, in different areas, what's the good part of town, what's the bad part of town, how people act in certain areas. So, a good example would be like, people from the west side, they might speak, act, stand, dress a certain way, as opposed to people who live in a different part of town, the east side or uptown, whatever. And then, you establish this norm by, observation, exposure, experience, and judgment, and just being in that environment. You might not be, you live in a certain spot, how people in your area, your neighborhood, act, speak, dress, whatever. When you're working, you can tell, you start picking up on differences in the different coverage area. So when you're able to establish, what's normal, what's accepted, it becomes really easy to pick up on things that don't fit in. And that has a lot to do with being situationally aware, or just aware in general. This is kind of like the entire basis for the Department of Homeland Security's if you see something, say something. That whole program depends on people living in their normal environment to spot things that are out of place and report them as, possibly involved in terror activities and things like that. And it goes way past, unattended bag in the train station, something like that. This is really, how people behave. This person doesn't fit in here. And it's not, I haven't seen this guy around here before. It could be that, but it's this guy acts differently than everyone else in the area. So, another example on the law enforcement side, 2 a.m. in a high crime area, you have some, well off looking, and again, you're profiling, you're stereotyping, but again, this is what, if you've established a norm, you have some, well dressed looking dude roll through the area in a high crime area at 2 a.m. in like a nice car, that piques your interest. It doesn't belong. It's not normal for that area. Now, could the guy be lost, wrong turn off the highway? Absolutely. But, the good cop is going to sit there and go, well, how's he acting? Does he look anxious? Does he look agitated? Or does he look comfortable like he's been here 100 times before and, he's looking to buy some crack? Okay. To the cop, he doesn't fit in. And he might be jumping to the conclusion of, oh, this guy, let's go arrest him. This is wrong. If it just starts out with, hey, this is wrong. This guy doesn't belong. This is out of place. At least he's got his attention focused on him, and that cop will be able to react a lot quicker should he get some more information that makes him think, hey, I have to act on that. So normalcy bias. We're humans, and humans are creatures of habit, hands down. We love normal. And liking normal leads to some biases, specifically normalcy bias. And what that does is really causes people to underestimate both the likelihood of a disaster and its possible effects, because people believe that things will always function the way they're normally been functioning. So what does that mean? That means people want things to be normal. People want that status quo. Which also sometimes causes them to turn a blind eye to potential danger, and they're not prepared for it. It's also a part of the brain filtering out things that are bad. Like, we don't want to believe bad things happen, so we just kind of filter that out and go, well, usually nothing bad happens, so if I just keep doing what I normally do, it won't really affect me. Well, it'll affect you. And the example is from the last episode. It's the standing in front of the door when you show up to a house. You knock, you've been told, stand to the side of the door, knock, announce, and you don't, because for so many times, nothing bad has happened. Well, let's say you do that 1,000 times, and on 1,001, as you're knocking, you hear something behind the door. It gets your interest is piqued, and you're like, man, that didn't sound right, that didn't fit in, but you continue to stand in front of the door. And something bad happens, whether, you get the gunshot through the door, or, the person opens the door and attacks you, or whatever. It's, you heard the thing that was out of place, you picked up on it, and your brain was like, well, let's filter that out as, I don't want something bad to happen, so I'm just going to pretend I didn't hear it, or I won't be able to react to it. Our brain craves normal. Like I said, sometimes we talk ourselves out of safety, so something to be aware of. Another thing is tunnel vision, or in the situational awareness world, the term is focused attention. Straight up, it's the people who bury their face in their cell phones while they walk, and you've seen those videos on the internet. People walk into the fountain, they walk into the glass door, they fall down steps, they fall into a hole in the sidewalk, And it's not a good thing. And that cell phone, man, in the 21st century, that is the biggest attention focuser ever. And then in, the EMS world, we teach tunnel vision. We don't want you to get tunnel vision. We don't want you to, get sucked into one thing on the scene. You should have a good global picture. But unfortunately, you show up, you want to take care of the patient, and your patient, really demands that focused attention. You should be paying attention to them, but at the same time, you need to be able to, you need to get to the point where you train your situational awareness that you can look around the scene and be aware. You can position yourself so that there's nothing between you and the door. You have a good point of observation between the patient and the rest of the room, or the wherever you happen to be. So, a good example. Oh, yeah, like we said, the selfies, the people taking selfies in front of train tracks and not realizing how close they are, and getting waffled by a train. So, we really try and teach this. But it's a learned technique. You have to make that conscious effort to do it. So how do we do it? How do you develop situational awareness? Can't really talk about that without talking about the OODA loop and its place in this process. So OODA stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. And what it is really, it's a learning system and a decision-making process. And it was developed by an Air Force fighter pilot, Colonel John Boyd. And what it did is, or what it does, it allows pilots to quickly adapt to the rapidly changing situations in aerial combat. But what they found is you can apply this to pretty much any head-to-head type confrontation in the world, in life, whether it's the business world, competitive sports, violent confrontation in a parking lot, or military strategy. So, what we think that just, being aware and paying attention is all situational awareness. But there's a little more that goes into it. So yeah, John Boyd, he was a Air Force fighter pilot, and this guy he's really regarded as one of the most brilliant military strategists out there. And he came up with this, and when he applied it, he actually taught at the Air Force Fighter Weapons School, and he would teach this decision-making process, and it was an ongoing process, and it would really help these pilots. So what he would do, he was so good at this, he would offer up $40 to any student who could beat him in aerial combat. And he would always start at a position of disadvantage, and then using this process, he never lost. This guy never paid out the $40, and it earned him the nickname, and he would do it within 40 seconds. So it earned him the nickname 40-Second Boyd. He's got a bunch of other nicknames, but for this one, that's the most important. So what did it do? If you've ever seen it or you've ever heard of it, you probably see a graphic. It's a closed loop, and it's got the words on it somewhere: observe, orient, decide, and act. And that entire process, those 4 steps, the observe, orient, decide, and act, it's, like I said, you can use it head-to-head competition, aerial combat. You can use it in business. What happens is, if the person who can cycle through all 4 of those loops in the fastest amount of time and consecutively, because this is a continuous process, they're going to win. They're going to win that confrontation. They're going to win that debate. They're going to win whatever. And obviously, the observe step is what people think is the situational awareness part of it, but it's not. It's really the second part, the orient. That's what really developing situational awareness really involves, because orientation tells us what we should look for when we're observing, and then takes those observations and then it puts it into context so we know what to do with the information, and that's going to help you to decide and then ultimately act, reassess, and then continue that loop. So that graphic people normally see, that normal loop, that's really the basic version. If you ever look up John Boyd's detailed version of the OODA loop, it's a very big, it's a very in-depth graphic, and it includes tons of like human behavior and psychology. And I mean, there's been really good studies and papers, essays written on the OODA loop, but it's been scaled down, to a nice digestible piece that everybody can use and understand quickly and be able to apply it. So observe plus orient, that really equals situational awareness. So how do we become better observers so that we can improve our situational awareness? And, how should we orient ourselves so that we can observe the right things and then understand the context for what we're seeing? So you can't really talk about that without talking about another military guy, Colonel Jeff Cooper. He was a Marine, and he's really regarded as the creator of what they call the modern technique of handgun shooting. And this guy was an expert on the use and the history of small arms. And he came up with a color code. It was a color code system. It really helped warriors to gauge their mindset in combat scenarios. And each color represents a person's potential state of awareness and focus. And he in plenty of interviews, he always said that he really didn't invent this color system. He just applied it. He figured out a way to apply it to warfare and mindset. Mindset was a very big thing with Jeff Cooper, and he came up with the color system. If there's a book out, one of his books, The Principles of Personal Defense, that's where he introduces it and applies it to gunfighting and mindset. So the color code, it goes from white, the lowest level, all the way up to red, the highest level. And just to kind of put it in context, each color represents a person's potential state of awareness and focus. And he always said that for optimal situational awareness, that we should always live in condition yellow. And condition yellow, it's really described as a relaxed alert state. There's no really specific threat situation, but you have your head up, it's on a swivel, you're taking in your surroundings with all your senses. Because most people really associate situational awareness with just visual stimulation, but you can also learn a lot about your particular environment and your scenario from the sounds or the lack thereof, and even the smells of the environment. So even though your senses are heightened in condition yellow, it's really important to be relaxed. And if you can be relaxed and you adopt that calm demeanor, you don't really bring unnecessary attention to yourself. So if you kind of, look antsy and your head's, swiveling back and forth, you're looking over your shoulder, people are going to notice that. But if you just kind of really calm and you're just looking around, just kind of calmly scanning your environment, people don't really notice what you're doing. And then also, being relaxed, it really ensures that you maintain an open focus, and that allows you to take in way more information about what's going on around you. When we get nervous or we get stressed, our attention really narrows, and it causes that tunnel vision. And that's just that. Honestly, you're trying to fight that fight or flight syndrome. So as you get nervous, you're trying to think, I need to focus on my one thing that's going to hurt me. Do I need to fight it or do I need to flee? So, having that narrow focus, that's going to cause us to miss important details in the environment. So to put it back in context, like condition white, unprepared, really not ready to take action. If you're attacked when you're in condition white, you're probably going to die unless your opponent is just an idiot. They're totally inept. And then there's condition yellow, like we said, relaxed alert, good situational awareness, taking in information. And then orange, specific alert to the probable danger. You're ready to take action. And then the very top of it is condition red, action mode. You're totally committed to the emergency at hand. It's it's time to do work. It's time to do whatever, fight, flee, whatever. And then over the years, people have added condition black, and that's system overload, breakdown of physical and mental performance. Fine motor skills are gone. You need to really have things committed to muscle memory, especially in the world of gunfighting and personal defense. When Jeff Cooper came up with the color code, for him when he was a Marine in I believe the 40s, condition black was active combat, like he was engaged in combat. He actually didn't put that in there. He dumped that down to action mode, totally committed to the emergency, but not quite fighting, because there's always something he really wanted you to have a way out. And then if you did have to fight, it was time to fight. So a couple things we can do to become a better observer. Put yourself in a position for optimal observation, some gamification, and mastering memorization. So putting yourself in a position of optimal observation, you really need to be able to actively observe as much of your surroundings as possible. So, just to put it again in perspective and context, if you're, in a movie theater or a restaurant, don't sit with your back to the door, right? So that way you can see trouble coming. And, you can also see the exit. You can determine where the other exits are. You have an idea on how to get out if trouble comes through the door. And it kind of goes back to the other episode. And so you've been ambushed, better to surprise than be surprised. So it's good to kind of have an idea. If you're at a restaurant, but again, it's based on, we don't always have the luxury of being able to pick the most optimal point in the room. If you're out and about, the waitress, you tell the waitress, you're like, I want to sit here. And she's like, well, sorry, someone's already sitting there. Here's your table. You pick the seat at the table that gives you the best view of the room and the exits and the choke points and whatever. If you're on a call, you do get to position yourself most of the time. I want to be able to see who comes through the door or who else is in the house, or how, again, simple principle of don't put anything between you and the exit. Move your bag out of the way, move furniture, to facilitate egress, whatever you need to do. Or, again, in context, we can't always do that all of the time. So gamification, it really comes back to playing mind games with yourself. It's just like the example for like turning on the reticular activating system. You got to actively tell your brain, let's look for this certain make and model of car while you're sitting in traffic instead of checking your email or your text message real quick. That way your brain stays turned on. You're training your situational awareness, in those, 60 seconds sitting at the red light. Look for people, if you're in a crowd, look for people with a certain color of clothing or a certain article of clothing. I want to see someone with a red hat, the woman with the green jacket. I want to look for, an adult with 2 male children. You actively have to look for that. And this also helps the other part of it, the mastering memorization. And that's really simple. You can do things like memorize strings of numbers, use a deck of playing cards, memorize license plates. There's plenty of books and videos out there how to do that. And it's also, I lump this into, helping with recall as well. How many times have you been on a call, you notice something out of place, and you ask your partner about it afterwards, and they're like, man, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I have a pretty good war story for that one. One night we were just doing regular work shift, except we had a third rider, and it wasn't a normal paramedic student or EMT student. It was a peds doc from the local trauma center. And I really have no idea why she was riding, but her entire goal for 12 hours was to start an IV line. And I still don't know why that was. Maybe because she hadn't done it. Sure, it's not something she normally does. I don't know. But we're like, yeah, great. Give her the basic safety brief and where some things are on the truck, and how we operate on a call, and off we went. And again, there's some clarification to this story. This doc, she was pretty attractive, and my partner was pretty interested in her, and that plays a big role in the rest of the story. So we get tapped out for a diabetic call, no big deal, west side of town. And again, for context, the west side of town, lower socioeconomic area, usually sicker people, chronic disease, chronic illness. That sometimes these are the people who are a lot of Medicaid patients. And they play the what meds can I get filled this month since I only have limited income or whatever. And again, that plays a role just because of the type of calls we typically run. I love the West Side because it pretty much reminds me of some of the parts right inside North Philadelphia, which is where I worked right before I moved down here. And it really kept me from being homesick. I love that side of town. Those are my people. So we go out. It's not an address that I recognize as a frequent access or a pre-hospital care, and not that it matters. It's a diabetic. Let's just go do this. And we hop in. We get in there. It's double wide trailer. And again, for context, it's just because it's a small area to work in. And if you've never worked inside of a mobile home before, the way they're laid out, you have usually a main room and then a hallway that branches down. Bathrooms and bedrooms come off of that. And, they have their own challenges, especially when you start carrying in bags of gear and whatever else. So we walk in, there's a lady laying on the floor, middle-aged female. She's out, she's snoring, sounds like a dishwasher, with her snoring and her gurgling for diabetic coma. There's a guy sitting on a couch. He seems disinterested, maybe because we just identify him as boyfriend. And, he's disinterested because, this young lady, she's a professional diabetic. It's not the first time it's happened. He's like, business as usual, do your thing. And then there's some other guy. He's just a dude. I'm going to call him Mr. Personality. He is kind of sitting in a straight chair, guarding the hallway. Like, he's just looking straight ahead, doesn't really care that we're there. He looks like he's got a job to do, and it's guard the hallway. It's out of place. I pick up on it. I keep an eye on him, because I know the peds doc wants to do her IV. So my partner helps her out with it. She sticks twice, doesn't get it. He sticks twice, doesn't get it. The boyfriend's starting to get agitated, but the guy in the straight chair, he's just looking straight ahead, looking at us, doing his job, guarding the hallway. I got time to kind of take in the environment while they're working on the IV sticks. I noticed this guy hasn't moved, facial expression hasn't changed, boyfriend still seems disinterested. I also notice that on the coffee table right near us where we're working, there is a loaded AR-15 mag being used as a coaster, which, that's cool. I like your decor. But my brain went immediately to, where's the rifle? Okay, or there's probably that rifle here. Okay, fine. I don't really feel like I'm in danger, but there's the potential. It's the South. It's America. It's probably a gun everywhere, knives everywhere, but just something to be aware of. My awareness was peaked. The more the boyfriend gets agitated, like, man, how come you guys aren't getting this, working as fast as normal, whatever. I kind of stepped in. It was my turn. I actually positioned myself so I could kind of watch everyone while I was doing the IV, and don't get mad, don't get judgy. But I had to start the IV in the top of this lady's foot. It worked. We gave her some dextrose. She woke up and she did the ritual thing. No, I don't want to go to the hospital. We do the thing. Hey, keep an eye on your sugar. Try and figure out why it dropped. Eat your peanut butter sandwich. Have a hamburger, whichever. She refused, and off we went. We packed up our stuff. We got our refusal, and off we go. Told my partners, I said, listen, why don't we go down the street and restock our bag because we used a bunch of stuff out of it. And they said, yeah, okay, sure, no problem. So we drive down the street, pull off into an empty lot, and we restock. And I said, hey, it's pretty. Do you notice Mr. Personality in the corner there? And they were like oblivious to him. Like they only thought the boyfriend and the patient were in the front room. And then I said, hey, did you guys notice the loaded AR mag sitting on the coffee table? And both of them were like, no. Now, I expected that from the doc because this is not her world. But my partner been doing EMS way longer than I have, way longer. But it was just two things that just jumped out and they just did not seem, they weren't right for that environment. And, being able to recall that, pick up on that comes into that kind of, I attribute it to, good area, good position in the room where I was able to observe things, being able to memorize, and then, really kind of prior to that gamification, I established a normal for the environment and I saw things that kind of jumped out. So, you've got to know what you're looking for and then put that information into context so it has some meaning and then it becomes actionable. And that orient step, that's really where that comes from. So there's kind of three things that play into that: establishing the baselines and the anomaly for that particular environment that you're in. And then human behavior plays into it. Mr. Personality looking straight ahead. Like I could still see that guy sitting there. And he was a big boy. And even though there were three of us, I think we would have lost that fight. And especially when you add that, add the AR-15 rifle into that equation, especially because I couldn't see it. I didn't know where it was. He probably did. And then, the third part is having plans of actions depending on your observations and then being able to, put a plan into action. So you've got to establish a baseline wherever you go, whether you're a student in a scenario, you kind of get that baseline with your lead in. They kind of set the stage for you. If you're out there working, cops are great at this. Even the fire department does a good job. EMS does a good job. You've got to be able to establish that baseline. And if you're listening to this and you think you're not good at it, start training yourself to do it. Start training yourself to do it. So some questions you really need to ask yourself to establish that baseline is, what's normal in a given situation? And it's going to differ from person to person and from environment to environment that you find yourself in. What is normal? And then you've got to decide, what is an anomaly? And like I said, anomalies are things that either don't happen that should, or that do happen that shouldn't. That's what directs our attention. And that's, we take in the surroundings and, that's how we focus. And then that's how you achieve that situational awareness. So your baseline, some good questions asked for the baseline, or to establish a baseline. What's going on here? What's like the general mood of the place? What's the normal activity that I should expect here? how do most people behave here most of the time. So there could be some, people who are outliers and kind of weirdos that look like they don't fit in, but they do. And then there's really, out of those, you've got those couple questions for your establishing a baseline, and the anomaly question, there's only one. What would cause someone or something to stand out? And that's it. That is situational awareness. That's really going to help you become the better observer and orient to the information that you're taking in. So there's a really good, I don't know about a good movie. There's a movie from the late 90s with Eddie Murphy and Michael Rappaport, and it's called Metro. And I think Eddie Murphy's like a hostage negotiator, detective guy, and Michael Rappaport wants to be like him. And Eddie Murphy trains him. And there's a scene in the movie where Eddie Murphy tells Michael Rappaport, I want you to walk through this door and then just listen to what I say. He makes him walk through, he makes him close his eyes and have him recall everything that he can, and but he only gave him like maybe a second and a half before he told him to close his eyes.
See a scumbag behind the counter with a sword off. There's a female hostage down in front of the cereal rack, and there's a special on toilet paper 4 for $1.29.
Yeah, it's a really good clip because it really does illustrate, good situational awareness, and the mastering of the memorization. So how does it all go together? Observe plus orient equals situational awareness. So and in context with the OODA loop as a system. So those who can observe and orient the fastest and the most consecutive times, they'll beat their opponent, no matter like I said, no matter if it's warfare, business, the corporate world, or competitive sports. So a lot of times when you hear somebody present OODA, that presenter will say you have to get inside your opponent's OODA loop to win. And, that's true. But, everybody kind of looks at that. That's really a military strategy. You got to get inside their loop and you're going to beat them. And I get it. Well, the way that you get in any point of it or in any context, the way you get inside someone's OODA loop is you force your opponent to reorient. Which means like you either provide another piece of information that throws them off, and it just causes them to have to, reorient. They have to take in that information, use it in context, and move, or decide. And then, you provide the rapidly changing environment, and it causes them to have to take in the new information and then decide how to ultimately respond. So kind of in times of danger, you're causing them to reset their OODA loop. And that's really good because that might provide you that extra few seconds to get out of danger. And you're probably taught this in EMT school and you don't even know it. If you ever, maybe probably during the psych chapter or psych module, they would kind of tell, sometimes they would tell you, come up with a word, like you have the safe word to tell your partner it's time to go. And then there was another part where they would say, kind of yell something inappropriate or out of context where it would confuse the person who you thought was going to fight you or something. And they'd be like, what? And then while they were going, what? You would be able to escape. So, I remember people saying, just yell the word cauliflower. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that's going to do, but I'll try it. But, I probably mispronounce it under stress. I don't know. So, it might provide you that extra couple of seconds to be able to get out of there. So here's what I need you guys to do. Go forth and practice. Okay? Over time, this is going to become automatic. You'll notice that it gets quicker. And then over time, you'll notice you're doing it without even really thinking about it. It'll become automatic. And it's just like anything else. You train to do a good assessment, you train to do an IV. You got to train your situational awareness, and it doesn't start and stop with like just being more observant. It's being more observant, how to become more observant, and how to take in the information, and what information should I be taking in, and then what do I do with it. So that's really all I have, guys and girls. I do appreciate you stopping by to listen. Getting a lot of really good feedback still from you guys. Keep listening, keep writing, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast. Got a bunch of Medic Up podcasts coming up soon after the probably one before the end of the year, and a couple really good ones coming up After the first of the year, the late calls will still keep going, trying to get everything out every week. I'm always open to your suggestions, so you can contact me plenty of ways through either social media, YouTube, Instagram, all of it. I look for all of it, the Facebook pages, all of it. So yeah, go forth and practice, and thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys out there on the next one.